and then R2, then R3. This is Ethernet switch. Fine. You can also have some other routers as well, like R4 and R5 as well. Fine. And here I will add one slot of serial interfaces, and then I'm going to interconnect them. Like here I use serial interfaces, here also I use serial interfaces, and here I'll be using Ethernet. This is your multi-access network now. Fine. So first of all, I'll be discussing about multi-access network with all of you, and then after I'll be talking about serial interfaces, right? So yesterday I discussed so many things related to IPv6, that how many types of IPv6 addresses we have, what are the meaning of them, and like first three blocks will be used to specify your global prefix, and fourth block will be responsible to specify your subnet ID, and remaining four blocks will be responsible to define your interface ID. Then I also discussed with you that link local addresses are also there, and link local addresses will be generated by devices automatically, dynamically, with the help of its MAC address, right? And then I also taught you that how will it be possible for devices to create their interface IDs with the help of with the help of MAC address of interfaces, right? So we have discussed all these things in previous class, and today is today we are going to perform all these practicals, right? And I also taught you that what are the uses of those messages of ICMPv6, such as router advertisement, router solicitation, neighbor solicitation, neighbor advertisement, redirect, right? So I have just taught you all those things. So today we will prove it, and first of all, what will I do? I will show you that IPv6 it can work same as DSCP even without doing any type of configuration. Serverless auto configuration. So here on F0 by 0 of R1, I will allocate IPv6 address like FC00:192:168:1 dual:1, right? This will be IPv6 address and /64. It means if you talk about interface ID of this subnetwork, it will be FC00:192:168:1. Tell me, dual:/64. So it will be your interface ID over here, right? So this is your interface ID that we will use here. We will be using here in this multi-access network. Whereas on R1, I'll configure this IPv6 address statically, one dual:1. What is the meaning by dual: over here? That all remaining blocks are having zeros, right? So definitely IP addresses will start from 1. That is why I have allocated 1, right? So here I have allocated 1. So then after I will show you that on R2 and R3 we can get an IPv6 address automatically even without doing any server configuration. That is why it will be known as serverless configuration. Serverless auto configuration. Fine. So I'll be configuring this IPv6 address at the end of R1 only. So let me have the console of R1 first of all. Then I'll be taking console of R2, then R3, R4, and then R5. First of all, R1, as you know that here we have to enable IPv6 routing. So why this command is mandatory for us? To allocate IPv6 addresses onto its interfaces. Or for what? Remember, to enable just routing. It doesn't mean that without enabling this command, we cannot configure IPv6 addresses onto its interfaces. No, we can still configure IPv6 addresses onto its interfaces, but the thing is, it will never be possible for this router to form routing table for IPv6 addresses. I mean, it will work same as layer 2 switch. Right? It will not be possible for this router to perform routing. So to perform, because we want that this router should perform routing for IPv6 networks, so we have to enable this routing over here, right? Fine. So here, after enabling this IPv6 routing globally, then go to interface and then say IPv6 address fc00c. In IPv6, all commands, most of the commands are same as IPv4. Just in place of IP, you have to mention IPv6. Otherwise, all remaining, all syntax will remain same. So fc00 192.168:1 slash, and then say, before saying no shutdown, what will I do? I will capture this link. I've not said anything like no shutdown. That is why we can't see any type of message over there. Now do one thing, move on R1 and then say no. So it has to verify that whether it is having unique IP address or not. So to identify whether it is having unique IPv6 address or not, it will generate neighbor solicitation. Neighbor solicitation. So this neighbor solicitation is there. And this neighbor solicitation have been generated for its link local address, because first of all it will verify that whether it is having unique link local address or not, and then after it will generate neighbor solicitation for that IPv6 address that you configured manually. So just after configuring your IPv6 address, just after saying no shutdown, you will see show IPv6 interface that on this interface it is having that IPv6 address that you configured onto it, and along with that it is also having link local address. So once you enables IPv6 addressing onto an interface, then it will immediately generate its link local address. Is not it? And see, link local address will be generated in that manner which I defined you in previous class, like with the help of its MAC address, and you can even confirm it. Show interface FA0/0. This is the MAC address of this interface C200. So it will add FFFE in the just middle of the MAC address, as well as it will also change 7th bit. If you convert 2 into the binary, 7th bit will become 1. So they have made it 0. That is why here it is what? C000, because it was already having 2 zeros, but in place of 2 it has also made it 0. And then 18FF, then FECC, fine, and then finally 0000. So it has defined its link local address in same manner which I taught you in previous class, right? And then first of all it has to verify that whether it is having unique link local address onto this interface or not. So it has generated one neighbor solicitation for this link local address. First of all, you can see over here, this one. And because when it generated this neighbor solicitation for this link local address, at that moment it was not having any IPv6 address configured onto it, right? So that is why in source IPv6 it was what? :: unspecified. This is known as unspecified IPv6 address, because it was not having any IPv6 address onto this interface at that moment. But destination was solicited, I think it's FF02 it means, which means it is a multicast MAC address, right? Sorry, multicast IP address, right? So if it is starting from FF02, it means it, of course, FF is there, it means it is a multicast IPv6 address. So it have multicasted this packet over here, right? And in it is having this neighbor solicitation for which address? For its link local address. So it is sending this neighbor solicitation to everyone that this is my target address. Of course no one will reply for this link local address because it is a unique. No one else is using the same link local address in this subnetwork onto this link, right? That is why it didn't get any neighbor advertisement in the response of neighbor solicitation. if it does not get any neighbor advertisement, it is same as like over there you were generating gracious arc for its own IPv4 address. So if someone else was giving reply, it means someone else is using that same IPv4 address. In same manner, over here it is generating neighbor solicitation for that IPv6 address which it have generated automatically. First of all, link local address, right? Just to verify that whether it is having unique link local address or not. So it have generated neighbor solicitation, and in target address it has configured that link local address, but no one else will be able to give neighbor advertisement in the response of this neighbor solicitation, because none of them is using same link local address. Understood or not? Then after that message, after that neighbor solicitation, it have also generated one neighbor advertisement. Now it have also generated neighbor advertisement. And how can we see that, how can we say that okay, this neighbor advertisement is generated by R1 itself? As you can check its source IPv6 address, and this is what FE80C0018FF FECC and 0000, which I just taught you that it is, I mean this link local address is the IPv6 address of R1, and destination is what, again multicast, and this time it is for all. FF02 dual colon means, dual colon 1 means for all. Hello. And it is containing again neighbor advertisement. See what is it having actually. As you know very well that neighbor advertisement will be responsible to have your layer 2 address. You see, it is saying that okay, this is target address and this is what, it's a link layer address. Means that it is informing to everyone that the MAC address of this, link local address is this. So it is informing to all of them. Then after it have generated one another message, which is router advertisement. As I said that all routers will also be responsible to generate router advertisement periodically, right? As you can see, router advertisement, and then once again router advertisement. So this router will keep on to send router advertisement periodically, but there is no specific time period for router advertisement, right? That okay, after just after 30 seconds it will always keep on to send, I mean whatever it is, right? So once again it is ICMP, and it is having this time what, router advertisement, and its type is what, 134. Its type is 134. It's not it. And as I said, it will be having your link layer address, which means layer 2 address. It will be having your MTU. It will also be having prefix information. And remember, only that router will be responsible to include prefix information in its router advertisement where you have configured your IPv6 address statically. If I go to any router and if I get an IPv6 address dynamically, automatically, then after, of course, router will be responsible to generate router advertisement, but that router will never include prefix information in its router advertisement. Fine guys, next is neighbor solicitation once again, and this time see, this neighbor solicitation is for that address which is specified manually, because it has to confirm whether this IPv6 address is unique or not. So see, neighbor solicitation, so it is trying to verify whether this is unique address or not. So this time it has generated this neighbor solicitation for this specific address, see, which you allocated to it. If someone else is giving neighbor advertisement in the response of this neighbor solicitation, it means someone else is also using same IPv6 address. Have you understood it or not? So first of all, neighbor solicitation will be generated for link local address. and then after, for that address which you will define onto your interface statically. Fine, good. Then after it, neighbor advertisement for its unique local address, right, which we define statically over here. See, because it has to tell everyone that okay, this is my link layer address for this address. So that is why it has generated neighbor advertisement, and this neighbor advertisement was unsolicited, and that is why it is what, multicasted. If your neighbor advertisement is unsolicited, it means it will be multicasted. If your neighbor advertisement is given in the response of neighbor solicitation, it means it will be unicasted. Same as router advertisement. If router advertisement is generated by a device periodically, it will always be multicasted. If it is giving it in response of solicitation, then it will be unicast as per document. But if you perform it as practically, then it will always multicast router advertisement, whether it is solicited or unsolicited. Even you can prove it by yourself, right? Fine, that's good. So we have seen that how router works after enabling IPv6 address. Fine. So we just allocated IPv6 address at the end of R1. Now let's move on R2. And on R2, I will show you the very first thing that you have to enable what? And then I can say no, and then I can say IPv6 address autoconfig. Here you will be able to see each and everything. You understand? Fine. And this router advertisement is generated by R1. Hey, this is generated by R1 itself, right? Hello. It was generated by R1. You see, prefix information is there, right? So don't think that this router advertisement is generated by R2. No, nothing. From R2, it is receiving only and only CDB packets. Now just press enter. Even you can also do one thing. Okay, autocomplete, just press enter. This whole process is going on. Now I think I should stop this capturing now because everything is done. However, just wait for a moment. Just wait. I'll stop it. Fine. When you configure here IPv6 address autoconfig, you will see that what has happened. Is not it. First 64 bits were taken from Piyush, and remaining 64 bits was copied from link local address into, see, remember, last 64 bits will be copied from link local address, and in link local address last 64 bits will be generated with the help of its MAC address. So first of all, it will define its link local address, and then it will copy remaining, I mean last 64 bits from link local address into your unicast address, I mean that you configured, that statically configured address, right? I mean you didn't configure it statically, you said IPv6 address autoconfig, and then it got this IPv6 address automatically from its neighbor. Not complete, not entire IPv6 address actually. It received first 64 bits from router 1, and then remaining 64 bits is defined by itself. Now let's see that what happened actually. See, when it came up, it generated what? Neighbor solicitation. Let me show you. Destination was multicast, source was unspecified, and this, see this one, this link local address is of R2, because if you move on R1, its link local address is what? C000, whereas on R2 it will be C001. So this is the difference, right? Now by looking at their link local address only, you can identify whether it is whether this message is generated by R1 or R2. Will it not be possible for you to identify now that this message is generated by R1 or R2? Just try to remember, on R1 it is C000, on R2 it is C001. So see this message, when I no shut interface of R2, as you can see, this message is generated by, because first of all it has to verify whether it is having unique link local address or not. So that at that moment it was not having any source address. So if your packet do not have any source IPv6 address, then in source it will specify unspecified address, which is dual colon. See, and remember, inside IPv6 header, let me show you, TTL will always be 255 for security reasons in all messages. See, right? So it has been generated by, tell me, R2. Fine. Then after it have also generated one neighbor advertisement. Let's see that which router have generated this neighbor advertisement. So see, it is also generated by R2, and it is containing its own link layer address, which is MAC address. Then after, router advertisement have also been generated by R2 first of all, and it does not have any prefix information. Does it have? Tell me, does this router advertisement have any prefix information in it? What I said to you, what I taught you, that only that router will include prefix information in its router advertisement where you have configured IPv6 address statically. Have you got it down? So this time you see that it is having MTU information, it is having link layer address, which is MAC address, but it does not have any prefix information. And again it will be having its hop count as hop limit as 245. Then after it, router solicitation, and this router solicitation will also be generated by R2. You know why? Just to know that is there any router which is already exist onto this subnetwork. So this router solicitation have been generated by, you see, R2. Check it out. C001, which is generated by, I mean if source is this, it means it is generated by R2. So it is having only what? See, what is this? Router solicitation. Now in the response of router solicitation, you have to give router advertisement. So this time it will be responsibility of R1 to provide router advertisement. You see, this router advertisement is transmitted by R1. See, source is what? C000, and in it is having like layer 2 address, which is MAC address, MTU information. Along with that, it is also having prefix information, as you can see. See, check it out. Tell me. Hello. And then after receiving this router advertisement, now what will happen? After receiving first router advertisement, now R2 can config itself multically, because we said auto configuration. So 64 bits have came from R1. Remaining 64 bits will be generated by R2 dynamically, or you can say automatically. Have you got it or not? So because this time R2 have generated remaining 64 bits dynamically after receiving router advertisement from R1. So what was the definition of router advertisement? We said that router advertisement is that message which will be used by routers to configure themselves. Which will be used to configure, which will be used by router to configure themselves. Just give me 1 second, please. So after receiving router advertisement, as I said, that router advertisement will be used by routers to configure themselves, right, automatically. So now R2 has received router advertisement from R1, and after receiving that router advertisement from R1, R2 has configured its own IPv6 address. Now after configuring its IPv6 address, again it has to generate router neighbor solicitation just to confirm whether the IPv6 address that it configured automatically is unique or not. So this time neighbor solicitation is just for that, you see. And this address was generated by R2, C001, you see. Hello, FC00 for 64 bits were configured from R1, and remaining 64 bits were copied from its own link local address. So you see, so it have generated neighbor solicitation just to confirm whether it is having unique IPv6 address or not, right? Whether this IPv6 address is unique or not. And then after, it have also generated neighbor advertisement for the same prefix, and neighbor advertisement is multicasted, you see. Destination is what? Multicast, FF02 12:1, so that it can inform, it can send this message to all, including nodes, routers as well as PCs. You see, neighbor advertisement. And then after, see, router advertisement have also been generated by R2. And see, R2 is, because router, if it is a router, then it is the responsibility of a router to generate router advertisement periodically, right? So again it is generating, see, even after having an IPv6 address, it is generating this router advertisement, but still it is not adding prefix information into it, because prefix information will be added from that router only where you have configured IPv6 address statically. Next router advertisement is generated by, you see, this one. This is generated by, okay, this is also generated by R2 itself, and again you can see that prefix information is not there. See, C001 is not it. So I hope that you people have understood the uses of link local address, because to initiate anything, at least you should have link local address, right? So first of all, whenever you will allocate any IPv6 address, whether it is global unicast or unique local address onto an interface of the device, first of all it will generate link local address of it, and it will verify whether it is unique or not, and then after it will verify your configured IPv6 address. Then it will verify that IPv6 address that is configured by network admin onto interface, whether it is unique or not. Once again, what can you do actually this time? This is, yes, stop it, right guys? After stopping it, now we can move on R3 as well, and on R3 also we can allocate IPv6 address. How? Dynamically. And remember that R1 do not have this record, do not maintain the state of this IPv6 address, right? Our R1 doesn't know that okay, it have allocated IPv6 address onto R2. That is why we also call it stateless auto configuration, because routers will never maintain the state of your IPv6 addresses. Like here, this time R1 doesn't know anything about R2. That it has allocated an IPv6 address to this R2, right? R1 doesn't have that information. R1 will never keep that information in its cache. However, in case of DSCP, you could see that okay, we have allocated all these IP addresses to these MAC addresses. So that is called stateful auto configuration or server configuration, right? That will not be known as serverless configuration. That will be known as server full auto configuration, right? Or you can say stateful. If you are using DSCP and then after you are allocating IPv6 addresses or IPv4 addresses dynamically, that's called stateful if you are allocating IPv6 address even without configuring DHCP, which is known as stateless auto configuration. Understood? Good. In same manner, you can move on R3, and on R3 also on FA0 you can say no shutdown, and then you can say IPv6 address auto config, and then if you want to receive default route as well automatically. If you want to receive a default route along with IPv6 address, you can configure this command over here. So first of all, let me do one thing before adding this keyword over here, IPv6, and then after go to FA0 I will say IPv6 address auto config. I have not added any keyword like default over here, so that it will not get any default route over here. So IPv6 interface brief, let me show you. See, it have got, and this time it is C002. See, C000 was on R1, C001 was on R2, C002 is on R3, and it have also got this information from R1. Have you got it? Now, if you check its routing table, is there any default route towards R1? Is there? But if you go to FA0 and if you say IPv6 address auto config default, what is it saying? Already? But does it have any default route? Does it have any default route over here? So remember that it can also be there in tshoot, like they can configure only this command like IPv6 address auto config, and then after they will say that okay, say you must have a default route from there, so you will try to add this keyword default. It will show you that okay, it is already configured, and if you see running config of FA0 even you will get, you will not get that default keyword over here. But if you add this command over here, it will say you that it is already configured. So you will not check its running config in tshoot over there, because you will be puzzled at that moment that why is it showing me that okay, it is already configured. Then you will think that okay, this command is already configured, but still you will not get default route. The problem is it cannot replace the existing command. It cannot replace existing command. So to solve this problem, do one thing. First of all, remove this command from here, IPv6 address auto config. Do show IPv6 interface brief. You will check that now there is no IPv6 address configured, and then once again say IPv6 address auto config and then default. IPv6 address auto config default. Do show IPv6 interface brief. Check it out. Again, it have got this IPv6 address C002, right? So IPv6 route. Sequence matters sometimes. See, and it is going towards C000, means towards R1, not towards R2, because it got it from R1 only. Because only on R1 we configured IPv6 address statically. Have you understood? Are you sure about it? Now, in tshoot, they can also inject some other types of fault as well. Like, what can they do? On R1, they can remove this command like no IPv6 unicast routing. Only on R1. And then they said that okay, you must use autoconfig command on R2 as well as on R3. So what will I do now? I will move on R2. I will say no IPv6 address auto config. Do show IPv6 interface brief. Does it have any IPv6 address? Once again say IPv6 address auto config. So it should get now IPv6 address from R1. So say do show IPv6 interface brief. Wow, have it got any IPv6 address? Have it got any IPv6 address over here? Because you enabled IPv6 addressing on this interface, it has calculated its link local address, but it have not got any global unicast or unique local address from R1. It have not got any IPv6 address. Even if you move on R3 as well now, and if you remove this command from here, do show IPv6 interface brief, Does it have any IPv6 address? Now say IPv6 address autoconfig default. Do show IPv6 route. Do show IPv6 interface brief. Does it have anything over here? Do show IPv6 route. Does it have anything inside? See, only static default route is there, but it have not got any IPv6 address from there. Actually, it will be configured by this router only. It is not getting this default route coming from there, right? And see, this time it have got it. It have configured it in the direction of. Have you got it or not? That's a problem. That's the problem. It should have been configured in the direction of R1 only. Is not it? That's the problem. To solve this now, again you have to move back again on R1, and on R1 you have to enable this command. So I'm just trying to make you familiar with key shoot tactics, right? So now you do one thing, move again on R2, you will see that you will get IPv6 address this time dynamically from your, see, even you can move on R3 as well. Do show IPv6 interface brief. It have also got it. Do show IPv6 route, but still default route is configured in the direction of R2. So it will be better for you guys to remove this command once and do show IPv6 interface brief. Do show IPv6 route. It does not have anything over here. So once again configure this command. IPv6 address autoconfig default. Show IPv6 interface brief, and then show IPv6 route. It has everything now, and once again this default route has been configured in the direction of R1. So this is the uses of, and see, even if IPv6 unicast routing is disabled on R3, then there will not be an impact. Try to understand it. If you disable it over here, then there will not be any impact, because it is not giving this information to anyone. It is simply receiving it. Even if you disable it, then it will start to use, it will start to work as a end host now. But again, it can get everything from the router. Are you getting my point or not? So this IPv6 unicast routing command must be enabled only on that router from where you are getting an IPv6 address. Otherwise, you won't be able to get IPv6 address from your router if this command is not there.
Once it has got the address and then we disable unicast routing, it will drop the IP address?
No. It will not drop, but there is a lifetime, right? There is a lifetime for each IPv6 address. After that, of course, it has to reset its, it will retry to get an IPv6 address, and then definitely. Got it? Fine. Apart from that, they can also configure this type of command as well on R1. IPv6 ND RA suppress. RA means router advertisement. Suppress means do not advertise them out from this interface. Wow. It means now this router will never generate any router advertisement out from this interface. And you know very well that how crucial it is. Without receiving router advertisement, routers cannot configure themselves. If you are saying auto configuration on any other router, and if they do not get any router advertisement from the router, from another router, then it won't be possible for themselves to configure automatically. Like this time, you do one thing, move back again on R2. So now, do show IPv6 interface brief. Now once again, Piyush. Hello. It haven't configured it in same manner. command.
Sir, indicate.
Neighbor discovery protocol. Just remove this command and now right. But again, see, default route is installed in the direction of R2. So you do one thing, remove that command and once again reconfigure it. And reconfigure that. Then again, default route would be installed in the direction of R1.
अगर ऐसी R2 की जगह एक और राउट होता और R1 को हम सप्रेस कर देते हैं कुछ जगह तो R3 इसकी तरफ पॉइंट करता है डिफॉल्ट रूट।
वो डिपेंड करेगा जिससे पहले मिल जाएगा रिप्लाई. Tell me. If there is any problem, please let me know. Fine.
R2 पे अगर उस प्रेस वाली कमांड चलाते हैं फिर तो डिफॉल्ट रूट की तरफ आएंगे.
कुछ भी हो फिर मतलब छोड़ो, कोई नहीं, टेंशन ना लो, मत आओ. Okay, so after going through all these things, now let me tell you that even without using auto configuration, also you can do this type of configuration. Like for an example, on R2, you can say FA0/0. I'll remove it. Do show IPv6 interface. In place of it, you can say IPv6 address FC00:192:168:1 dual colon slash what does it mean? That 64 bits have been assigned by you and remaining 64 bits will be copied from link local address. Simple. Understood? So you can also use this keyword EUI64. What was the command actually? See, I simply defined network ID and then I said EUI64. Now, as I said, that last 64 bits have been copied from your link local address. To prove it, what will I do? I will change its link local address. I'll say IPv6 address FE8. You can also type. Should I use FE9? Tell me. Let me show you. FE9 0:2 and then you can say it accepted this address, right? Even it can also accept what? FE8. It can also accept FEB, but it cannot accept FEC. Even it cannot accept FE7 as well. So I will make it FE8 only. Do show an interface FA0/0. Fine. And let me show you its IP address now. Check it out. Say wow. Last 64 bits of this address have been changed automatically. because what I said, that remaining 64 bits will be copied from your link local address. So it has copied last 64 bits from link local address into your unique local address. In same manner, you can configure your link local address on R3. Interface FE0x0, IPv6 address FE80:3 link local. So IPv6 interface, it will also modify everything now. See. However, previously it was having this IPv6 address actually, because it copied 64 bits from there. But now it has copied last 64 bits from here. In same manner, you can move on. R1 show IPv6 interface brief. Even if I change its link local address as FE80:1, this IPv6 address will remain same, because here I'm not configuring it automatically. I configure this IPv6 address statically. Then interface FE0x0 IPv6 address FE80:1, and then show IPv6 interface brief. Check it out. And now let me show you on R1. For fast Ethernet links, it will always maintain neighbor cache. Show IPv6 neighbor. So it does have MAC address of R3. Even if you try to communicate with FE80:2 output interface, whenever you will try to ping with using link local address, it will always ask for output interface, because link local address can be same onto multiple interfaces of your device. That is why it is mandatory for router to ask about its outgoing interface, because what I said in previous class, that multiple interfaces of a single device, of a common device, can have common link local address. So you have to type fast Ethernet 0x0 show IPv6 neighbor, and now this is in reachable. If you do not send any traffic for next 30 seconds, then it will move back into stale state. Even you can also try to communicate with FC00, 192, 168, 1:2 as well as, and now say show IPv6 neighbor. Tell me. Reach. After some time you will see that it will move into stale state. क्या हो रहा है? Stale. This is the MAC address of R3 and this is the MAC address of R2. And you know, once your neighbor state has moved into stale state, then after if you try to transmit data, then after transmitting your data, once again after 5 seconds it will confirm whether it is still reachable with this MAC address or not. To know about that, it will again transmit what? Neighbor solicitation. You know very well now. I don't need to tell you anything. Fine. Great. Now if I move on R1 serial 1 by 0, let's configure IPv6 address in this format: 2000 12//64. What do you say? Or you do one thing, configure this time on /120. You can also use /120 as well. So move on R1's S1 by 0 IPv6 address 2000:192.168:12/ on serial. There will always be two entries for single interface in IPv6. One will be under connected, it will be having network ID. One is for L, local, means locally configured IP address. It will always be on /128. Even in new iOSs for IPv4 itself, you will get two entries for a single interface.
ERP में देखा.
Then move on R4 now. On to S1 by 0. So no shut, and then IPv6. First of all, you have to enable IPv6 unicast routing. Then S1 by 0 IPv6 address auto config. So IPv6 interface brief. Check it out. Have it got any IPv6 address over there? Dynamically. Tell me why.
दूसरे एंड पे नहीं है.
I have already configured on R1, but still it didn't get any IPv6 address automatically. Debug IPv6 ND. Do one thing, configure right, and once again I will say it is sending router solicitation, but it is not getting appropriate router advertisement this time. See, however, it doesn't mean that it is not getting router advertisement. No, it will receive router advertisement, but if you are using auto configuration, it means you should get first 64-bit from there, but it will get 120 bits. How will it be possible for it to define only 8 bits by itself? How will it be possible for this router to define last 8 bits? Let me show you that R1 is generating router advertisement without any problem over here. You will see that R1 will generate router advertisement out from S1 by 0. And one more thing that you can also come to know on R1, show IPv6 interface brief. See, on serial interface it is using the MAC address of fast Ethernet 0 by 0 itself. It's not it. Fine. Because C 000, do you remember? Of course, on serial you will never get any MAC address. I'll show you. Just wait for a moment. What is this? Sorry, S1 by 0. See, solicitation is generated by R4 C0003, but it's not getting any router advertisement coming from there, from R1. So IPv6 interface, check it out. Everything is fine, but it is not giving any type of message. But if you do one thing, go to serial 1 by 0, do one thing, remove this one, and in place of it just configure what, slash do show IPv6 interface brief. /64 and move back again on R4. So IPv6 interface brief, check it out. Have I configured that IPv6 address auto configuration over here? Okay, that's the problem actually in it. Have not been generated by devices onto their serial interfaces due to serial interfaces, because they are point to point, right? Hello. So they are not generating any router advertisement or router advertisement out from their serial interface. That is why it is not possible for neighbor device to configure itself dynamically, right? Over here, like you can move on R4, you can see that it have not got any, see, IPv6 address. So here you have to configure this IPv6 address manually. Serial 1 by 0 IPv6 address 2000:192:168:12 2/2/64. Right now, let's prove it that whether will it be possible to allocate IPv6 address on 1/120 on to Ethernet or not. So do one thing, move on R1 and go to its FA0 by 0. Do show run interface FA0 by 0 and just remove this address from here. right? And after removing this IPv6 address, so in place of this, now I'll configure its subnet mask, its prefix length as 120. So do show run interface fa0/0, show IPv6 interface brief. Then move back again on R2, show IPv6 interface brief, on to fa0/0, do show run interface fa0/0, remove that command from here, and then say IPv6 address auto config, do show IPv6 interface brief. It's not it. Again I'm saying, but you are not able to get that IPv6 address auto. Means that it has proved that auto configuration will work at /64 only. That's what I wanted to prove actually on to serial interface. But on serial interfaces, routers are not generating. Routers will never send any router advertisement. And without receiving router advertisement, devices will never, it will not be possible for devices to configure themselves automatically. Understood? Are you okay with this? Hello? Fine. Then after it, let's move back again on R1 and on to its fa0/0. I will remove this IPv6 address. In place of it, I will make it once again /64, and you will see that this time what is happening? Then see, it's not it. So in this way it will work. I have told you that what are the differences in between serial interfaces and fast Ethernet, right? Then after it, to perform routing, like I have to start it from static routing itself, right? So to configure static routing, for an example, like R1 is having one loopback, interface loopback 1, IPv6 address fc00:192:168:10112:/64. Oh, sorry. In place of it, I have to configure 112:101:1. So now you will see show IPv6 route. This one 101 will be available in the routing table of R1 on /64. Right? And now you do one thing, move on R4, show IPv6 route. Does it have any information about that prefix? So if you try to communicate like ping fc00, sorry, yes, it was fc00 colon will it be possible for your router to transmit data towards it? Of course no, because it does not have any route. To configure the static route, it is very simple. In place of IP, you need to mention Ethernet mask, then next hop address, and here, because it is serial interface, it will be good for you, or it will be enough for you to define only and only exit interface. Check it out. AD value is same as previously 1. Now you try to communicate with this. Remember, in show IPv6 neighbor, it will never show you serial interfaces. I mean, all those routers which are connected through serial interface, because in neighbor cache it will be having only neighbor's MAC address in its table, but on serial interfaces you do not have any MAC address. You are not required to have the MAC address of next hop. That is why in IPv6 in neighbor table you will never get entries for serial interfaces, because serial interfaces do not have any MAC address. Because before transmitting data via serial interface, you will never require to encapsulate your packet with Ethernet header. On serial interfaces, by default SDLC works, so SDLC will be responsible to encapsulate your packet. Understood? Fine. Then have rest. Let's continue it once again. So as it was not from R4 we were not able to communicate with the lane users of R1. Then after defining this static route over here, as I defined here only and only exit interface. See, in case of serial interfaces it's good, you can define your exit interface, but remember that wherever you will be having multi-access network like Ethernet network and all, you have to define exit interface as well as next hop address. It's mandatory. It's mandatory because there is no gracious R. Got it? Have you understood it? So in case of Ethernet, then you have to define your next hop address, always remember, right? Like if you are on R2, and from R2 if you want to communicate, like this is R2, and from R2 I will again try to communicate with the loopback of R1, like FC00 colon 192.168 colon 101.12 colon 1. It does not have any route to reach this prefix over here, so again you have to define its route. So to define its route you have two options, like IPv6 route, you can say FC00 colon 192 colon 168 colon 101.12 colon /64, and then you can define your exit interface only. Right now you try to communicate with this. You see that what is happening over here, because you didn't define this time your next hop address. So are you able to communicate with it now? Tell me. So what I said, that it will be required to define your next hop address in case of Ethernet links, because there is no gracious ARP. So proxy ARP, because in IPv4 we were using proxy ARP to solve this problem, right? But here there is no proxy ARP available in IPv6. That is why you have to define your next hop address along with exit interface. So you do one thing, just remove it, and along with this exit interface you define your next hop address as well, like FC00, or you do one thing, you can also define your link local address as next hop address. It will not create any problem. FE80 dual colon 1 show IPv6 route. Check it out. Now you have your next hop address, right? So you can try to communicate with. Is there any problem now? Hello? So in next hop address you can define either link local address or global unicast or unique local address, right? Whatever it is. But you should, you have to define it. You have to define your next hop address. If you do not define your next hop address along with static route, along with exit interface, then it will create so many problems. Have you understood it or not? Tell me. So in this way you can define your static route. I also taught you that how to configure default route when you are getting IPv6 address from your neighbor dynamically, right? But if you want to define your default route statically, then it is very simple. IP route, this is your default route. That's why I said that it is
IPv6.
yes, IPv6 route. Dual colon /0. This is your default route. Here you are not required to type 0000 space 0000 something like that. So now you can define your next hop address over here, like along with exit interface. You can say fe80 dual colon 1 show IPv6 route. If you wanna change your AD value, then after you can define your your AD value as well. But here in static route you cannot define your AD value as 245. It's not possible. In IPv6 during configuration of static route you cannot configure its AD value as 255 because 255 is completely untrusted. Understood? There is no conditional static route, there is no reliable conditional route because you cannot call route map along with static route. You remember that in IPv4 we configured all those things, but here it is not possible. Fine, static routing is done now. Let's go for RIP NG, because if you are planning to configure RIP over IPv6, then you have RIP NG, next generation, right? So you have to configure RIP next generation. So to configure RIP NG, RIP next generation, you can do this thing. You can perform all these things in this manner. Like, let me do one thing. Let me configure one loopback on R4 as well. Interface loopback one IPv6 address fc00 colon 192 colon 168 colon 104 dual colon 1/64. So IPv6 interface brief. Check it out. And then after on R5 as well. First of all, move on R4 on its S1 by 1 IPv6 address f2000 colon 192 colon 168 colon 45 dual colon 4/64. Fine, guys. Then I'll move on R5 as well on its interface S1 by 0 IPv6 address 2000, or it was FC. Tell me. Okay, I took 2000. On R5 also IPv6 address 2000 colon 192 colon 168 colon 45 dual colon 5/ interface loopback 1 IPv6 address fc00 colon 192 colon 168 colon 105 dual colon 1/ show IPv6 interface brief. Fine. Move on R1. To configure RIP NG, it's very simple. IPv6 router RIP, then its process name. In RIP NG, it is also possible to configure more than one processes of RIP onto a single router. In IPv4, it was not possible to configure more than one process of RIP because you were saying only router RIP, that's it. There was no process, right? But here in IPv6, you can also configure more than one processes of RIP on a single router. Even you are not required to configure this command as well. Just go to your interfaces like S1 by 0. If I wanna enable RIP over here, say configure this command IPv6 RIP. Process name, you can take anything like CCIE and then enable. Then go to loopback 1 and enable same process over here. Remember, on a single router, it will be good for you to enable same process, common process on all interfaces. Otherwise, what will happen that prefixes cannot move from one process to another process, same as OSPF. But onto two different routers you can have different processes. It will not create any problem. Like you do one thing, move on R4 and go to serial 1 by 0 IPv6 RIP. Let's say here you are using Cisco. What? Enable, then loop back 1, enable interface serial 1 by 1, and again enable this one. Enable this process onto these interfaces. Then you can move on R5 as well. On R5 again I will be using CCIE serial 1 by 0 IPv6 RIP CCIE enable, and then you can move on. Okay, first of all you have to enable IPv6 unicast routing, and then you have to move under serial 1 by 0 say IPv6 RIP CCIE and then say enable, then go to loopback interface and enable it. Then you can check its routing table to IPv6 route. You will see that it will learn prefixes coming from like R1, like it must learn the loopback of R1 as well. So it has received the loopback of R4, but it haven't received the loopback of it have received loopback of R4, but it haven't received the loopback of R1 yet, but definitely it will receive that. Will take some time, but definitely it will come here. Oh, still it have not received the loopback of R1. Might be that something is wrong on R1. Show IPv6 route. It have received 104, 105, but it is not giving its own information. Show IPv6 interface loopback 1 IPv6 RIP CCI enable. Go to R4, check its routing table for IPv6. So it is receiving 101. Yeah, okay, over here it was configured statically, that is why it was not accepting update was coming in RIP, and because it didn't install in its routing table with the help of RIP, so how will it be possible for this R4 to advertise that prefix information towards R5? Anyone can inject this type of problem in IPv4 as well, especially in RAPE and EICRP. Of course, it will not affect, and it will not affect in case of OSPF, because OSPF is a fully linked state routing protocol. But in RAPE and EICRP, of course. So you do one thing, just remove this prefix from here. Show IPv6 route. Fine. Now you can move on R5. You must get I101 as well. Right? And how many, this 101 is coming onto R5 after crossing only 2 hops, but here it is showing me 3. Because in IPv6, whenever a router will install any route in its own routing table in RIP, with the help of RIP, before installing that prefix in its own routing table, it will add itself as one hop count. Previously in IPv4 it was adding itself when it was giving an update to next neighbor, but this time even before installing prefix in its own routing table, it will add itself. Hello. The only difference that in IPv6 it is adding itself before installing route in its local routing table itself, but in IPv4 it was adding itself when it was giving an update to next neighbor. Whenever this R5 will give to R6, let's say that R6 is also there, it doesn't mean that it will advertise that prefix with hop count value 4. No, it will advertise that with hop count value 3 only, right? But whenever you will see this prefix available in the routing table of R6, it will be there with hop count value 4 on R6, right? So in this way this RIP will work. And over here, show IPv6 protocols, which is what is running RIP process name CCIE. So IPv6 RIP CCIE. By default UDP port number
521.
multicast address will be FF02:9. AD value will remain same as previously 120. Previously maximum path was 4, but this time it is 16. Update interval was 30, still it is 30. Previously expire interval was known as invalid interval, but here we are calling it as expire interval and it is same as previously. Garbage collect interval, previously we were calling it as flush interval, which was 240 seconds, but this time it is 120, and this 120 will start after expire interval. Split horizon is on, poison reverse is what? Off. You can enable it. Have you understood it? So in this way, this is the default configuration, and you see that on these two interfaces RIP NG is enabled, RIP NG next generation, and this is what? Now you do one thing, you can capture this link. RIP NG is giving an update, see, and in RIP NG it is what? Version 1, see, port number, and it is using UDP user datagram protocol, right? And it is using this destination address, and of course like all these prefixes are going there, you see, matrix. And it was generated by R4 towards R5. R4 is giving this information. So when it is giving 101, it is giving with matrix only 2. But when when R5 installed it in its routing table, it was with matrix 3. R5, it was having this prefix in its routing table with matrix 3. Matrix increases or decreases? Okay. On R1, on R4 it will be 2 actually, because here it is bit different from IPv4. It is bit different from IPv4 because it will add its hop count value even before installing prefix in its local routing itself, right? Whereas in IPv4 it was adding itself when it was giving an update to next neighbor. I hope that you people have understood all these things now. So if there is any problem, please let me know related to RIP NG configuration. I don't know. It was 25, might be here also it is 25 or something like that. But I don't know about that. You can search about it. Fine guys. So now finally R1 is receiving all these prefixes, and from R1 now you can try to communicate with the loopback of R5. You can try to ping with even in source you can put your own loopback. Any problem? Tell me. Sure. Then after in RIP NG also you can generate a default route, you can perform summarization, you can change AD value, but not per prefix per neighbor, right? You can perform route filtering, but there is no offset list. However, same as offset list, we are having one command, but that is quite different from here. And of course you can also configure, it doesn't support authentication. It doesn't support authentication, this RIP NG. Right guys? And I think now we should start it tomorrow, like the all remaining practicals of RIP, and then of course I will start EIGRP and we'll finish OSPF as well, because today we learned a lot of things related to small things of IPv6, and tomorrow we will continue all these routing protocols. right?
सर
What do you say?
रिप में जब 16 राउटर जब अपडेट रिसीव करेगा तो वो तो ऑप काउंट